The year is 476 CE. A Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a mere boy of 15, is deposed by the barbarian general Odoacer. This event marks what history would later call the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but it was not an abrupt collapse. It was the culmination of centuries of internal decay and external pressures, a slow erosion of power that had begun long before this symbolic moment in Ravenna. Understanding this decline requires us to journey back, to examine the very foundations upon which Rome was built and how those foundations began to crack. For centuries, Rome's military prowess and efficient governance fueled its expansion. The Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and prosperity under emperors like Augustus, fostered trade, infrastructure development, and cultural flourishing. But this very success sowed the seeds of future problems. The vast empire stretched thin, requiring enormous resources to defend its borders against increasingly sophisticated adversaries. Maintaining control over such a geographically diverse realm proved an ever-increasing challenge. The succession crises that plagued Rome were endemic. The lack of a clear imperial heir often resulted in civil wars, bloody conflicts that drained the treasury, weakened the army, and destabilized the entire empire. The Year of Four Emperors in 69 CE serves as an early illustration of this recurring problem, highlighting how quickly internal power struggles could unravel even the most seemingly secure regimes. These conflicts diverted resources away from crucial defenses and fostered a climate of uncertainty. The economic backbone of Rome began to buckle under the weight of its own size. Inflation became rampant as emperors debased the currency, reducing the precious metal content of coins to meet their expenses. This eroded public trust and crippled trade, leading to widespread economic hardship for many citizens. The burden of taxation fell disproportionately on the lower classes, fueling resentment and unrest. Maintaining a vast empire was simply becoming too costly. The vastness of the empire also led to administrative bloat. Corruption became pervasive at all levels of government, diverting funds intended for public works and defense into private hands. Provincial governors often exploited their positions for personal gain, further alienating local populations and undermining Roman authority. The efficient bureaucracy that had initially contributed to Rome's success now became a source of inefficiency and resentment. On the frontiers, Rome faced relentless pressure. Germanic tribes like the Goths, Vandals, and Franks, driven west by migrations further east, increasingly challenged Roman control. Initially, these groups were often integrated into the Roman military as auxiliaries, but their loyalty was frequently questionable, and their presence gradually eroded the purity of the Roman legions. The frontier became a constant zone of conflict. The Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE proved to be a watershed moment. The Roman army suffered a devastating defeat at the hands of the Visigoths, revealing the vulnerability of its military and shattering the myth of Roman invincibility. Thousands of Roman soldiers perished, and the Goths were allowed to settle within the empire, a decision that would have far-reaching consequences for Rome's stability and future. The division of the empire into western and eastern halves by Emperor Diocletian in 285 CE was intended to improve governance and defense. However, it ultimately exacerbated existing tensions and created separate power centers. The wealthier and more stable East continued to thrive, while the West struggled with economic decline and barbarian invasions. This divergence would contribute significantly to the eventual fragmentation of the empire. Christianity's rise presented another complex factor. While initially persecuted, it eventually became the state religion under Theodosius I in 380 CE. Some historians argue that Christianity's emphasis on spiritual matters diverted attention and resources away from earthly concerns, weakening Rome's military resolve. Others contend that it provided a new source of unity during times of crisis. Regardless, its impact on Roman society was profound and irreversible. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 CE was not an end but a transition. The Western Roman Empire fractured into numerous smaller kingdoms ruled by various Germanic tribes. While Roman culture and institutions would endure, the unified structure that had dominated the Mediterranean world for centuries was gone. The story of Rome's decline is a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most powerful empires are vulnerable to internal weaknesses and external pressures. The reign of Honorius, while marked by relative stability initially, ultimately proved disastrous for the Western Roman Empire's long-term prospects. His reliance on powerful generals like Stilicho created a system where military authority overshadowed imperial power. While Stilicho successfully repelled numerous barbarian incursions, notably Alaric's first attempt at Rome in 408, his increasing influence fueled resentment and accusations of treason among the Roman aristocracy. This political instability would be exploited by those seeking to undermine Honorius's rule, contributing to a cycle of purges and unrest. Alaric's subsequent campaigns were a direct consequence of Rome's inability to provide him with the promised tribute land and gold. His Visigothic forces, veterans of Roman service themselves, felt betrayed by an empire that had repeatedly relied on them only to deny their due. This wasn't simply about material gain. It was a profound insult to their honor and a demonstration of Rome's weakening authority. Alaric's actions exposed the fragility of the empire's defenses and its dependence on barbarian manpower, a dangerous vulnerability. The sack of Rome in 410 CE was more than just a military event. It was a psychological blow to the empire's prestige. The city, long considered invincible, fell to barbarians for the first time in centuries. While Alaric's forces didn't systematically destroy the city, looting and sparing many buildings, the symbolic impact resonated throughout the Roman world. News of the sack spread rapidly, undermining confidence in Rome's ability to protect its citizens and further encouraging barbarian incursions. The writings of contemporary figures like Jerome provide invaluable insight into the anxieties of the time. His letter to Paulinus grappled with the moral failings of Roman society, arguing that divine punishment was a direct result of decadence and spiritual decline. While such explanations offered solace to some, they also reflected a growing sense of helplessness in the face of overwhelming challenges. The idea of Rome's fall as an act of God resonated deeply within Christian communities. Following Alaric's departure, Rome experienced a period of instability and shifting allegiances. The city became a pawn in the power struggles between various barbarian groups, Visigoths, Vandals, and others, each vying for control. This internal conflict further weakened Roman defenses and made it impossible to re-establish order. The once mighty legions were fragmented and scattered, unable to effectively protect the population. The Vandalic kingdom's establishment in North Africa proved particularly damaging to Rome. They controlled vital grain supplies that had long sustained the empire. The disruption of this trade route led to widespread famine and economic hardship in Italy, exacerbating existing social tensions and further eroding Roman authority. This loss of access to essential resources was a crippling blow. Valentinian Vicer's reign was characterized by incompetence and political intrigue rather than effective leadership. He was more a puppet of powerful figures like Titus, who struggled to contain the relentless barbarian pressure. Valentinian's assassination in 455 CE further destabilized the Western Roman Empire, opening the door for another period of turmoil and demonstrating the weakness of the imperial institution. The increasing reliance on barbarian mercenaries within the Roman army ultimately proved corrosive to its effectiveness. While these soldiers provided much-needed manpower, their loyalty was often questionable and tied to financial incentives rather than genuine allegiance to Rome. When payments were delayed or withheld, a common occurrence due to economic difficulties, these mercenary units frequently deserted or even turned against their employers. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 CE by Odoacer is often presented as the definitive end of the Western Roman Empire. However, it was more a symbolic act than a sudden collapse. The empire had been steadily disintegrating for decades, its power and authority long since diminished. Odoacer's actions simply formalized what was already a reality, that the Western Roman Empire no longer possessed the capacity to govern itself effectively. The legacy of Rome didn't vanish with the deposition of Romulus Augustulus. Roman law, language Latin evolved into Romance languages, and architectural styles continued to influence Western civilization for centuries. The Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, preserved many aspects of Roman culture and traditions, ensuring that elements of Rome's heritage would endure long after its political demise. The echoes of Rome resonate still today. The reign of Honorius saw a continued fragmentation of imperial authority. While nominally emperor in Ravenna, his power was increasingly challenged by powerful generals vying for control of the legions. Stilicho, though initially a capable defender against Visigothic incursions, ultimately fell victim to court intrigue and suspicion fueled by political rivals. His execution in 408 removed one of Rome's most effective military leaders, leaving the empire vulnerable and further destabilizing an already fractured system. The seeds of future collapse were firmly planted. Alaric's Visigoths, emboldened by Rome's weakness and their own grievances over unpaid wages and land, repeatedly sacked the city. The first sack in 410 was a profound psychological blow to the Roman world. It shattered the myth of Rome's invincibility. Contemporary accounts describe scenes of unimaginable devastation, churches desecrated, public buildings looted, and citizens enslaved. While the material damage could be repaired, the symbolic impact resonated across the empire, a clear sign that the mighty Rome was no longer untouchable. Following Alaric's departure, Rome faced further turmoil. The Vandals, under their king Gaiseric, emerged as a significant threat in North Africa, seizing control of the vital grain-producing provinces. This loss crippled Rome's ability to feed its population and sustain its armies. Gaiseric's subsequent naval raids along the Italian coast became increasingly frequent and devastating, further draining resources and undermining imperial authority. The Vandals transformed from nomadic raiders into a powerful maritime empire. The Western Roman army was increasingly composed of barbarian mercenaries. While providing manpower, their loyalty was often questionable and dependent on payment. These troops frequently switched sides or deserted when faced with hardship or the prospect of better rewards elsewhere. The reliance on external forces weakened the empire's military cohesion and eroded its ability to effectively respond to threats from multiple fronts. Rome increasingly fought wars using the very people it sought to control. Theodosius Sima's division of the empire in 395, intended to improve administration, ultimately exacerbated its weaknesses. The Western Empire struggled under less capable rulers compared to its Eastern counterpart. Resources and manpower were increasingly diverted eastward, leaving the West progressively more vulnerable. This geographical split solidified diverging political and economic trajectories, diminishing any chance of a unified defense against mounting external pressures. Economic decline was a persistent issue. Constant warfare disrupted trade routes, depleted precious metals through debasement of coinage, and imposed heavy taxation on an already strained populace. Agricultural productivity suffered from neglect and insecurity, leading to food shortages and famine in many regions. The once thriving Roman economy withered under the weight of constant crisis, impacting every facet of society. The Huns, under Attila's leadership, became the ultimate terror of Europe. Their devastating raids across Gaul and Italy in the 450s forced Roman forces into a desperate defensive posture. While Rome itself was spared direct attack, the Hunnic campaigns further destabilized the surrounding regions, disrupting trade, displacing populations, and stretching Roman military resources to their breaking point. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 CE by Odoacer, a barbarian general, is often cited as the symbolic end of the Western Roman Empire. While not necessarily a sudden collapse, it marked the culmination of decades of decline and fragmentation. Odoacer did not claim to be emperor. Instead, he declared himself king of Italy, effectively ending the line of Western Roman emperors. The legacy of the Western Roman Empire extends far beyond its political demise. Roman law, language, Latin architecture, and engineering profoundly influenced subsequent European civilizations. The infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, public buildings built by the Romans continued to serve communities for centuries. Even in defeat, Rome's cultural imprint remains indelible on the landscape of Western history. The Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to flourish for another 1,000 years, preserving many aspects of Roman culture and legal tradition. While geographically distinct from its fallen Western counterpart, it served as a vital link between antiquity and the medieval world. The story of Rome is not simply one of decline. It's a testament to resilience, adaptation, and the enduring power of ideas that continue to shape our world today. The Visigoths, initially settled in southern Gaul by Roman decree, began to assert their independence throughout the mid-5th century. Their kings, Alaric and later Wallia, skillfully exploited internal Roman divisions and economic weakness. Raids escalated into full-scale invasions, demonstrating Rome's waning military capacity. While earlier treaties attempted integration, a policy of foedus, these proved unsustainable due to continued Roman oppression and the Visigoths' ambition for self-governance and land. The sack of Rome by Alaric in 410 CE was a pivotal moment. It shattered the myth of Roman invincibility and sent shockwaves across the empire. While not utterly destructive, the looting and desecration profoundly impacted Roman morale and served as a potent symbol of decline. Contemporary accounts from Jerome and Orosius vividly describe the chaos and suffering endured by the city's inhabitants, amplifying the psychological blow far beyond material losses. Following Alaric's death, the Visigoths relocated to Iberia's modern-day Spain and Portugal, establishing a kingdom that would endure for centuries. This westward migration further destabilized the Western Roman Empire, drawing away valuable manpower and resources. The establishment of a semi-independent Gothic realm fundamentally altered the political landscape, creating a buffer zone between Rome and other migrating Germanic peoples. Attila the Hun's campaigns in the mid-5th century presented a new and terrifying threat. The Huns, nomadic warriors from Central Asia, pushed other Germanic tribes westward, forcing them into Roman territory and triggering renewed conflicts. Attila's devastating raids across Gaul and Italy drained Roman resources further and exposed vulnerabilities previously masked by internal strife. The Vandals, originating from North Africa, seized control of Roman provinces in 429 CE. Their naval power allowed them to raid the Italian peninsula with impunity, even sacking Rome itself in 455 CE. This second sack was more destructive than Alaric's, targeting valuable treasures and further eroding Roman authority. The loss of North Africa also deprived Rome of a vital source of grain, exacerbating food shortages. The Western Roman Empire's legal system, once a bedrock of its stability, increasingly struggled to maintain order. Corruption within the judiciary was rampant, undermining public trust and hindering effective governance. Laws were often ignored or manipulated for personal gain, further contributing to social unrest and economic decline. The complex legal framework itself became burdensome, stifling innovation and discouraging investment. Economic hardship plagued the Western Roman Empire throughout its decline. Debasement of coinage, reducing the precious metal content, led to inflation and eroded purchasing power. Trade routes were disrupted by warfare and banditry, stifling economic activity. The burden of taxation fell disproportionately on the remaining productive classes, further discouraging investment and fueling resentment towards the ruling elite. The role of Christianity is complex in understanding Rome's fall. While initially persecuted, Christianity eventually became the state religion under Theodosius I. Some historians argue that this shift diverted resources and loyalty away from the traditional Roman values and military ethos. Others contend that it provided a moral framework during times of crisis, though its influence was often intertwined with political maneuvering. Romulus Augustulus, the last Western Roman emperor, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain, in 476 CE. This event is traditionally marked as the symbolic end of the Western Roman Empire. However, it wasn't a sudden collapse, but rather the culmination of centuries of gradual decline and fragmentation. Odoacer did not declare himself emperor, but instead ruled as king, acknowledging the authority of the Eastern Roman emperor in Constantinople. The legacy of Rome persisted long after 476 CE. Roman law, language, Latin architecture, and institutions profoundly influenced Western civilization. The Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, continued to flourish for another 1,000 years, preserving much of Roman culture and legal traditions. While the political entity known as the Western Roman Empire vanished, its impact on history remains undeniable. The Vandal kingdom, established in North Africa by Gaiseric, proved a persistent thorn in the empire's side. Raids along the coasts continued relentlessly throughout the 5th century, disrupting trade and draining resources. While nominally acknowledging Roman authority initially, their independence was effectively complete. The Vandals' naval power allowed them to dictate terms, demonstrating Rome's waning ability to project force across its vast Mediterranean domains. Their control of North Africa also strangled vital grain supplies, exacerbating existing food shortages within the crumbling Italian peninsula. Justinian's reconquest of Italy, 535–5554, offered a brief resurgence. Belisarius, his brilliant general, achieved remarkable victories against Ostrogoths and Vandals, reclaiming vast territories for the empire. However, the prolonged warfare decimated both the invaders and Roman infrastructure alike. The Italian peninsula lay ravaged, its population drastically reduced, and its economy crippled. Justinian's efforts, while strategically significant, ultimately proved unsustainable, placing immense strain on the Byzantine treasury and leaving Italy vulnerable to future incursions. The Lombard invasion of 568 marked a turning point. These Germanic warriors swiftly conquered much of the Italian peninsula, establishing their own kingdom alongside remnant Roman holdings. The Byzantine presence was reduced to small coastal enclaves, primarily around Ravenna and Naples. Lombards were less interested in Roman administration than extracting resources and asserting dominance, creating an environment of instability and localized conflict that further fragmented Roman authority. The Exarchate of Ravenna became the last bastion of Byzantine rule in Italy. This strategically important region served as a military and administrative hub, attempting to maintain some semblance of Roman control. However, its power was increasingly limited by both Lombard aggression and internal political maneuvering within the Byzantine Empire itself. The Exarch's authority extended only as far as his legions could project, leaving much of Italy beyond his reach. The rise of the papacy gradually filled the power vacuum left by Rome's decline. Initially subordinate to the emperor in Constantinople, popes increasingly asserted their own authority within Italy. The Church became a vital source of stability and social welfare during times of turmoil, gaining influence over local populations and challenging imperial control. This evolving relationship would reshape the political landscape of both Italy and Christendom. The iconoclast controversy, 726–843, further strained relations between Rome and Constantinople. The Byzantine emperor's attempts to ban religious icons were fiercely opposed by many in Italy, leading to a schism within Christendom. This theological dispute exacerbated existing political tensions and undermined the authority of the Byzantine Empire in the West, effectively severing ties with its Italian holdings. Charlemagne's conquest of the Lombard kingdom, 774, brought much of Italy under Frankish rule. While he affirmed papal authority, his empire proved too vast and unwieldy to effectively govern. The Carolingian Empire subsequently fragmented, leaving Italy once again vulnerable to internal strife and external threats. This period witnessed a resurgence of local autonomy and the rise of powerful city-states. The emergence of powerful city-states like Venice, Florence, and Milan marked a shift towards a more decentralized political structure. These urban centers fostered economic growth through trade and craftsmanship, accumulating wealth and influence. Rivalries between these burgeoning powers frequently erupted into conflict, replacing the overarching authority of the Roman Empire with localized struggles for dominance. The memory of Rome persisted long after the empire's collapse. Roman law, language, Latin evolving into Romance languages, and architectural styles continued to influence Western civilization. The concept of a unified empire served as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale for subsequent rulers seeking to emulate or avoid the fate of its predecessor. Rome's legacy endured, albeit transformed. The fall of Rome wasn't a singular event, but a protracted process of decline and transformation. It represents not an ending, but a complex transition from one form of political organization to another. The legacy of Roman civilization continues to shape our world today, reminding us that even the most formidable empires are susceptible to internal decay and external pressures. Understanding Rome's fall offers crucial lessons about governance, resilience, and the cyclical nature of history.